had a crazy childhood, right? Without going too deep into it, like my dad was a sociopath. He's passed away.
Can we
And
define sociopath for people? Because I think that word gets thrown out a lot. But what does
yeah,
that mean to you? Rich Schefren, I appreciate you showing up, man. It's good to see you on here.
I'm happy to be here bright and early on a Friday.
People frequently say, thank God it's Friday, or oh, it's Friday, and they're all excited. And you just gave that response because you've got a party for a fight tomorrow. But in general, my response is like, yeah, I don't know, it's just another day. Like Saturday's not going to be that much different than my Friday or Thursday. So I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
wondering.
I mean, I say that I guess like the only difference in my weekends is that the day starts later, which I enjoy.
Mm. Yeah, I like the dead noise, right? Less chirps and chimes and beeps and buzzes.
Yeah, it's like this morning I woke up at 6. I jumped rope for like an hour. Then after that, like went in the sauna for a half hour, then jumped in my cold plunge, then all in a rush because like I have a client that I was talking to at 8. Like
Right.
normally I would prefer to drag my feet a little bit in my morning workout, maybe extend it a little bit longer, like, and I get to do that on the weekends, right? And then as soon as my call with my client in Brazil was over, then I talked to our licensee in Spain, so Strategic Profit Spain. And, so it's like I knew that on a day like today, I have to get all my working out done before the day starts because like I'm looking at back to back to back to back to back like stuff till 6 o'clock tonight. Whereas like
Right.
I will do some work on the weekends, but it's not going to be slotted. It's not going to be scheduled. And so I can have a more lackadaisical kind of feeling for my days. And I kind of like that. And there's always a balance, right?
Yep.
But yeah, so that's the only difference that a weekend has. I love what I do. I just, I would love to, like this morning, I got everything done and I would have gotten it done if I had an extra hour or two and maybe I would have been less efficient, but I kind of enjoy being less efficient sometimes and not having to rush through stuff.
Well, I very much feel the same way with this huge asterisk, and that is that I have internal conflict over this. So on a Saturday morning, I'll wake up and I'll spend, I'll wake up slowly and like have coffee and get a little work done or read or write and then do the workout. And then it'll be, a long cardio session, and the bike ride will, instead
Right.
of a half hour, 45 minutes of cardio, it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I get back and it's like fucking noon. And then I feel conflicted and I'm like, damn it, I didn't optimize my morning. And, that's probably a Brad problem, but it's real. I think it's this consistent struggle between optimizing time and allowing yourself to just be happy with what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that, how old are you?
42.
Yeah. So I'm in my mid 50s and I'd say that like, I felt like you did in my 40s. And now that I'm in my 50s or been in my 50s for a while, and the kids have all kind of moved out. So now we have this big house and we're by ourselves. Like there's just, I've just chilled out a little bit, I guess. Like I used to feel that conflict that you're talking about, like when I was in my 40s and now it's like, if I finish everything by noon and the kids are gone, so there's not even anything to like, there's not as much to do. So like, I'll do some work just because, right? Like, but there's not, like there's less, I guess there's less pressure for my time on the weekends now, whereas like when I had my kids and I'm running all over the place and all that kind of stuff. And so now I kind of relish the kind of kicked back, kind of relaxed kind of thing. And I would say also just in work, I kind of vacillate between intensity and kind of a lack of intensity that I've always kind of thought about. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but I always considered myself more of a sprinter than a marathon runner, like that, especially in the online world where you're trying to rise above the clutter and get attention for a campaign or whatnot. I've always kind of and I guess I kind of started this pattern back when we were doing a lot of launches and our business was really dependent on launches. They were these peak periods where you were fully intense, working crazy hours. They would launch, you'd bring in a bunch of money, and then I would like pull back for a month or so personally, kind of not do much, then ramp up again and do like another sprint, as opposed to someone who was just consistent, like kind of a marathon runner. I found it was kind of easier to like rise above the clutter, like then let it dissipate, like when the campaign, and then rise again. And I guess to this day, I still kind of work that way. I like will do periods of intense, heavy duty work where my calendar is back to back to back to back. And then there will be weeks where it is very much not that, where there's big gaps between the things that I have to do. And I go back and forth on that. Too much time, too intense, kind of, I find really draining, but too much time kicked back and laid back also, I find kind of not ideal as far as bringing out the best in me mentally, physically, emotionally. So it's kind of like I have like go back and forth quite a bit.
Well, I wanted to linger on the topic of this because it's all really the same topic, right? So how you behave in your personal life in your mornings and how you approach work. And there tends to be a through line in each person's individual life of just how they execute, right? Or how they approach things. Do you think that the sprint versus the marathon framework and your association to it, do you think that there is an optimal approach, or do you think it's specific per entrepreneur? Do you think it matters?
I think that it's specific to the entrepreneur. That I think that what I have a couple thoughts that are like in there, right? That I think that being an entrepreneur, right, is the closest that you can be to godlike, in the sense that you are creating a living, breathing organism that has the potential to grow beyond you and to live beyond you as well, right? Like you're creating this organism. And so that's one thought that I've always felt. And that I also feel like as the entrepreneur, it's your world, you get to make the rules, right? Like your business, your rules. And in coaching a bunch of clients over the years, sometimes that's not as obvious to people as I think it should be. And then, when I started coaching, like I was the first business coach online, which is kind of scary to think. A lot of the stuff that I've taught, was stuff I learned, right? It wasn't stuff I created. And a lot of that stuff has kind of like is all over the place these days. Maybe I helped get it out there, but these were big ideas to begin with. But there are certain things that I taught back then that never really seemed to be as popular as like build a business around your strengths or something like that. And one of them is that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs miss the point that it's their world, they create the rules. And because they miss that point, they also think about their business in a way where they think about themselves and their business as some mythical version of their current self, that they are they think that they're going to be better than who they've been in this business, as opposed to recognizing who they are and designing a business to thrive based on flaws that they have and everything else that, and that's what I mean when I say, like, it's your business, you make the rules. If you're, if you're not money motivated, a business needs to be. So you need to figure out how that business is going to operate from a money motivated standpoint when the owner is not money motivated. You have to address that in the design of the business, right? Like, I can't create a program in a vacuum. Like, if I was sent to a hotel and I'm not allowed to leave the hotel room until I finish creating a course, I don't know that I ever get to leave that hotel room, right? Like, I need public pressure. I need I need shit to finish. And so I designed my business in a way where the person who's in charge of creating content and courses, who is a procrastinator, who wouldn't finish left to their own devices, can still thrive in that situation. And the way that we did it is that I wrote reports. Those reports sold a live coaching program, a live program of some sort. Then I would deliver that. We'd sell it. I would deliver it live, which meant that, like, I was always finishing right before the next, right, like a minute or two before the next, like, module was supposed to be out. And then it would become an evergreen type course after I was finished with it. And so that was the way that as opposed to me trying to fix my issues, right, which would then make my business success further out, because now I got to fix this first about myself, then maybe my business can be successful with this change I've made. As opposed to doing it, it's like, what if I never changed? How does this business succeed? And I think that entrepreneurs have this great opportunity, if they're familiar enough with themselves, like they have enough self-knowledge to know how they mess stuff up, that they can design a business where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I love that idea in general. There are two thoughts that pop up for me. One is a very good friend of mine years ago, Jesse Elder, said, it's more important that a belief serves you than that it's true. And that mentality of, hey, this is what exists, whether that's your self-awareness of yourself, whether your perception of yourself is accurate or not, just internalizing that and saying, hey, I'm going to build around what I think to be true here, to play to what I think are my strengths or weaknesses, and how it works. I love that approach. The struggle that I have with that is this sort of the balance between, or the conflict between, what people say is authenticity, or who they are, versus striving to be better. And so there's like, okay, well, yeah, this is just me. Sorry, accept me. I'm kind of an asshole. Versus saying, oh, okay, well, sometimes I can be an asshole, but I am striving to be better than that. And so I want to create a frame that forces me to be better than that. And I don't know where those intersect really, but so I guess that's the question for you, is how do they intersect? If you say, hey, I'm going to build the business with my current skill set or frame, how do you play with still expanding and getting better and reaching?
It's an interesting question, because I remember, I'm not in therapy now, but I've been in therapy many times, right? And I remember one of my most recent therapists, which, like, I guess was about, stopped seeing her like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but about 10 years ago, we were talking about something, and I was talking about this, and she's like, well, that seems very convenient then, that you don't have to change. It seems like, so kind of along the same lines of what you're saying. And I kind of agreed with her. I said, I totally get what you're saying, but, as someone who's coached a lot of entrepreneurs, like, my goal is to make someone successful. And what's going to make them successful is having a business designed around who they really are, because personal change is really difficult. I think, though, I think that more I would say that your question is a good question, right? But I would say that the overwhelming majority of entrepreneurs um, are more kind of making the mistake that I'm talking about, which is that they think they have to change in order for their business to be successful, than the few that might think like I'm perfect the way I am, right? Or like deal with it, right? Because I'm talking about it from a standpoint of like what really gets in your way. Look, can you build a business that where the person in charge is an asshole and can still succeed? Yeah, I think you can. And probably better than a business where the entrepreneur in charge is an asshole and is pretending not to be an asshole and builds a business around the idea that he or she is not an asshole, but really is, right?
Yep.
Like, so yeah, I get it. And I think that, but I also think that, and I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I think it's relevant. So I had a midlife crisis when I was around 40, like, about 13, 14 years ago. And I, part of what tripped that midlife crisis was that I had more than achieved what I had hoped to achieve. And I found myself unhappy, and now was like in this kind of position where shit, the stuff that I thought was going to make me happy made me happy for like a week or two when I achieved it. But I'm like in this place now where I'm not happy and I have what I want. And now what? Like, I don't even believe that the next big accomplishment is going to bring any long-term happiness. It will be a week or two of happiness. Like, damn, I did it. Right. And so for me, yeah, the midlife crisis was unpleasant. And at one point I decided, okay, well, look, if achieving goals is not bringing me long-term happiness, then maybe I shouldn't have any goals. That really didn't work out very well. But when I thought about, okay, like I've achieved what I wanted, I'm not happy. Like, where do I go with this? Right. Like, I started like thinking about it a lot in my journal, and what I kind of came to was I feel most alive when I'm in pursuit of something. That's what makes me happy, in pursuit, right? And so what I realized about myself is that it's kind of cliche, right? Like, it's the journey, not the destination. But for me personally, right, like the only purpose I feel having a goal serves is that it gives me a reason to get out of bed in the morning, excited about taking on whatever obstacles, challenges, et cetera, kind of surface, whatever opportunities to seize on. But that, it's not a question of the it's not a question of achievement, and it's not a question of like, geez, I'm not motivated to achieve my goals. Then you have the wrong goals, because the purpose of for me, I'm not necessarily recommending this for anyone else, but the only purpose of a goal is that I'm excited to pursue it, and it gives me a reason to get out of bed in the morning to pursue it. And so I've always since then, that I've kind of always evaluated my goals from that standpoint. Are they working for me? Are they getting me out of bed? Are they, am I, whatever it is. And it could be something really like minuscule, like consistently 30 days doing something, right? Or something bigger than that. But that's my relationship to goals. And it kind of also plays out in business, because personal change goals are hard work, and I'm not necessarily there has to be some payoff that I'm pursuing, or I'm probably not going to go in that direction. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does very much to me. And my frame on sort of the meaning of life is growth. which you said pursuit of something,
Yeah.
and progress would be somewhere along the lines of a synonym there, which
Hmm.
is if you are not making progress towards the goal, then it's difficult to be happy. Because as you pointed out, when you hit the goal, it's a temporary burst of a positive feeling, and it might be a
Right.
variety of things for you. But it's the self satisfaction or the fulfillment that's coming from getting better at the thing or getting closer to accomplishing the goal over time, at least for me. Um, I also want to close the loop on the first point, which was this idea of being who you are to do the business or trying to pretend to be somebody you're not to do the business. And I think that the lesson there from your framework is create the business in accord to who you are so that it will succeed if your behaviors are the same as what they are, if they play into your strengths and weaknesses. But set the business up in a way where if you improve on things, it's a lever for the business, but it'll work even if you don't improve personally. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that is a fair summary. I'd say that, if all of a sudden I became very effective at creating courses, nothing that we've done interferes with that. It's just that I don't need to be in the way I was doing it. Yeah.
Let me back out for a minute because I want to talk kind of first of all, there are a couple things I want to talk about. Like we breezed by the fact that you jumped rope for an excessive period of time. Most people can handle jumping rope for like 3 minutes, so I want to get back to that in a minute. But let's go origin story here. So I know you. We met fairly recently,
Hmm.
both speaking at an event in Cabo, which was
Hmm.
delightful. Um, but
It was.
your name has kind of circled around the marketing space for me for many years, and the reputation um, that is in my head of you has always been sort of this creative, successful marketer that some of the largest people in the marketing arena listen to and look to for marketing advice. Um, so I want to get to kind of how that happened and where you are, but why don't we start from the beginning and how you got into business in the first place? Because I think that's pretty entertaining too.
Yeah. And, I'd say that, I've had a lot of contrasting experiences, right? So, preface everything I'm going to say by that because, I've had, yeah, the just very different experiences as I was growing up, et cetera, all the way to today. So, what I will say just real quick, because I don't really want to make it the emphasis of this, I had a crazy childhood, right? Um, Without, yeah, going too deep into it, my dad was a sociopath. He's passed away.
Can we define
And
sociopath for people? Because I think that word gets thrown out a lot, but what does
yeah.
that mean to you?
Um, well, I will give you a couple. The last conversation that I had with my dad before he passed away, we were at a cigar bar here in Delray, and then he was flying up to New York to have an operation that he wasn't supposed to die on. But I was up there, but I didn't, I was in the waiting room. But he was sitting across from me and we were talking about random stuff. And he said to me, I don't remember what led into the conversation, but he said, when I sit down with someone, I am trying to get all the money that's in their pocket into my pocket. And I don't get that sense about you. And I'm like, I'm like, that's the furthest thing from my mind when I meet someone and talk to them, right? Furthest. Like we are so not alike, right? Um, yeah, my dad was ruthless. He fucked me over in business deals.
Wow.
He had this unique ability to not feel any guilt, regret, or fear. And yeah, certainly served him well, but didn't serve necessarily the people around him very well. So just a inability to feel fear or guilt or remorse. I would say that's part of it. I'm not a psychologist and I'm not,
Sure.
but those were clear. right?
Helpful frame
Um,
though.
yeah. And I ran away from home when I was in my early teens and was taken under the wing of a couple guys in the Colombo crime family who were fixing horse races. They were in the book Wise Guys, which is what the movie Goodfellas is based on, but they were not in the movie. Like that section didn't make it into the movie. And I was just a gopher, like I was a kid, right? Like just running at the track to get them pizza, lobster, corn on the cob, whatever. But they were telling me what to bet, and they were fixing horse races. Um, I won a lot of money back then. Then I got in trouble and got caught, and not by the police, thank God. They did a couple years later. But in my very first after school job was at a place called Investor Center, which was where what's his name? Jordan Belfort got his start. So I was working there after school, taking a bus, like, in 11th grade to Investor Center, and was working there. And Jordan got hired a couple months later. He didn't come from Wall Street. There was no guy like this. This was his first, the scene in Wolf of Wall Street where he goes into a strip mall. That's supposed to be Investor Center. It wasn't in a strip mall. It was in an office building. But nonetheless, I saw Jordan and saw him do his thing and saw him thrive in his first stock brokerage job, and also recognizing how sleazy and disgusting that was growing up and being around mobsters and all this. Like I totally like have seen this kind of stuff, right? But then I went to school in the Midwest, Case Western, worked for Arthur Anderson and Anderson Consulting. So totally other world, right? And I took over my very first job was taking over a failing clothing store. That store, I was able to turn it around. We were the first store to bring a bunch of brands that are well known now into the United States, like Diesel, et cetera, right? We were the first store to have a DJ in the store. Then we built a recording studio in the store, and the store became very successful. And
what role did you play in there? Because that's like that's kind of it sounds like a pivotal adjustment from uh, mobster, which I'm sure I'm sure you have tons of stories there,
yeah,
to school. But then right out of school, you said you were taking over a store.
yeah.
What was your role, and were you hired to do that, or how'd you fall
No,
into
I
that?
wasn't. It was a family business. It was the store was popular in the 80s, and then it had just went downhill. This is 93. And I was about to start my second semester of my senior year because I had taken a year off and I worked at every division of Arthur Anderson. And I my dad had this business. It was never his main business. And the break even was about 3 million. And the store was doing at that time 1.5 million. The lease was going to run
Ouch.
out in 6 months and he was just going to close it. And I made him a deal like, let me take it over. I'll drop out of college. Let me take it over. And if I can make it break even or better in those 6 months, then renew the lease. And if I can make it profitable, I will compensate you for every dollar that you lost from the day I take it over. And when I do, then I want 50% of the store. Right. And so that was the deal. And that's what we did. And that's what I did. And the store, it was on Broadway, kind of on the border of NoHo and Soho, north of Houston, south of Houston. And it's very competitive retail environment. And the only way that we could win was me taking the store in the direction of club culture, which no other store was really catering to at that time.
Yeah, how did that even hit your head? Like that's a strange shift to combine those two things. Did you see it happening somewhere else? And this because
No,
this is like the first sign that I'm seeing in marketing with you, or aggressive marketing.
looked at all the people that we were competing with, and I didn't think we could compete on, like, we're not going to compete with the Gap, they're vertical. We're not going to compete with Urban Outfitters, they have too much clout. We're not going to compete, like, so we had to find a lane.
Mm.
And I was into the club culture at that time. I had my pierced tongue, my pierced nipples, and all that kind of shit. And so it was, you know, I thought this was a place that we could win, where I knew more and the people that worked for me knew more than other people did. And there was this opportunity to kind of cater to a market that no one seemed to be catering to. As far as, there might have, our store was kind of large, like it was about 14,000 square feet.
Mm.
Whereas, like, there were stores that might have catered to the club life, but these were small stores. And there was no big store that was really committed, right? And I would say that um, that's a pattern that I have followed a lot of times. Like, go into a market, not necessarily intentional. It's not like, but I just, like, looking backwards now, I can see it over and over again, where I went into a market and there was no one doing on a bigger level what I wanted to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I never really thought about it in the clothing business, that being the case. But when I think about it now, that was the case. And so, the record label also took off because we built a recording studio right in the middle of the store. And that was at the beginning of, like, the electronic music craze. So it was a really successful run. Like I said, I took it over when I was doing about $1.5 million. I gave it back to my family when we were doing 7.5, and with much higher profit margins too. And, well, there was no profit margin when I took it over, but
Right.
but higher profit margins. And I gave it back because I realized pretty quickly that I did not want to be in a family business, especially with my dad. And so the easiest thing to do was to give it back to my family and walk away from it. And so that's what I did. I took about 2 years off, and then I got hypnotized. I read an article in Time Out magazine about this hypnotist. I've never been hypnotized, and I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. And maybe when I get hypnotized, it'll help me figure out what I want to do next. Because, I kind of had semi-retired, but it's not like I had made insane money where I was now going to spend from like 25 on retired. I just knew that, like, I didn't need money today or tomorrow, but at some point I would need it again. And so I went and got hypnotized to figure out what I wanted to do. I ended up being I'm highly hypnotizable. So it was like a profound experience. So much so that I
Crazy.
kept going back for more hypnosis sessions. Then I started studying it. Then I learned it. Then I decided I wanted to open a business that was a hypnosis business. And so I found that there was one person in Virginia Beach that had, like, a hypnosis clinic. I tracked him down. I offered him money to go work for him, like, which he thought was the strangest thing in the world, right? Like,
I mean,
but he had learned a lot of things over having a clinic for 15 or 20 years that I would prefer not to learn the hard way. I'd prefer to learn the easy way. So I called him and told him, like, what I've accomplished already, that I'd like to come work for him and that he doesn't have to pay me. I will pay him, because my goal is to come back to New York and kind of replicate what he's doing. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. Right. So,
man, I want to pause on that because first of all, a lot of people were just like, hypnosis, maybe Rich is nuts. But I want to dig into this because the hypnosis thing's fascinating, and where you went with it was. But the thing I wanted to highlight was it's not uncommon for successful entrepreneurs to give the advice of going to work for free for somebody
mhm.
else that is successful, or to at least offer that. But going a step further and saying, hey, I will pay you to be able to shadow you and work for you and do the work for you so that I can learn, um, is a stretch for, I think, probably a lot of people. But when you think about it, or what I thought about right away was the parallel between that and paying for a course, and how much better the actual experience is working for somebody to learn versus buying a course, which, by the way, is a huge opportunity to learn from somebody's expertise if the course is actually coming from somebody that has the
Yeah.
experience, right?
Yeah.
But paying to work is like a level up from that. So I love that, but I wanted to point that out because it's a unique idea.
It's also the difference, I'm a voracious reader, and there's a huge difference between a book that was written because someone wants to be on the bestseller list or whatnot versus someone who's had 30 years invested in anything and now is like sharing what they've learned. Like that's a totally different kind of book, right? I prefer the latter, obviously. And you can spot them, right? Pretty easily. So yeah, like, look, this was the only guy that I could find that is doing exactly what I wanted to do. So they're really, I don't think I would have been successful had I not done that in hindsight now. Too many things to learn, right? And in Manhattan, it certainly is a more expensive place to learn these things than Virginia Beach. That's where his was. But, you know, yeah, he had spent 20 years figuring this all out. I wanted to kind of shortcut that. And so we did. And I then opened up a hypnosis center. And then I had like a real learning experience because everything I did in the music and fashion business was really slick and image focused and very style, kind of embedded into everything that we did. And so I brought that type of marketing into the hypnosis world to try and get the phone to ring, and that didn't work at all. And then I had to start learning direct response. And the more the ad was embarrassing, the uglier the ad, like violating everything that I had done, like in the fashion world, in the music world, the better it did. Right. So I was like, geez, I thought I knew shit. Maybe like the shit I know doesn't apply here. And that was what put me in touch with people like Jay Abraham and Dan Kennedy and Gary Halpert, was that experience in the hypnosis business. And we grew the hypnosis business pretty fast. We grew from like zero, right, when we started, to about 13.5 million in 4 years. And then 9/11 happened. And that really impacted our business a lot. I had never failed at anything. And the idea that I wouldn't be able to just figure out how to make this business thrive during this time never really occurred to me.
Let me bridge a gap there. So and I only know this because we talked about it, but the hypnosis business, 0 to 13.5 million, this is all in Manhattan, and these are all brick and mortar locations. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Mhm.
Okay.
We were building a fourth, and all of our advertising was newspaper driven. And after 9/11, like there wasn't many ads, and the first 50 pages of the newspaper were all death and destruction with no advertising. And our ads needed to be far front, right side, like for them to work. And now they weren't working, nor could we be at the front of the newspaper. And so pretty quickly things got pretty tough, and I might have been able to have salvaged it, but made some stupid moves based on the fact that I had never failed before and didn't assume that I was going to fail this time either. And yeah, we had the conversation that like when I decided that like I was not going to be able to necessarily turn this around, um, you know, we sold 9-week programs, 6-month programs, year-long programs. Majority of our business was year-long programs. And when people signed up for a year-long program, they, used their credit card. And I was told that, we had about $6 million worth of programs that were partially paid for at that point. And that if I closed all those people, they could be in their 11th month of a 12-month program. If they didn't get what they were promised, they could reverse the charge and I would be liable. So I was on the hook for like $6 million. So instead of closing and having to deal with that, we stayed open. And for the next year, I basically ran on a skeleton crew, and we had, because at 13.5 million, we had 60 full-time hypnotists working for us, plus, receptionists, plus nutritionists, plus whatever. Right. And so I had a year of like working my ass off just to make payroll every 2 weeks.
Ugh.
Right. And so as soon as that was done, right, like done, merchant account stuff, like every new program was now sold an 11-month program. Then the next month, only 10-month programs, and the next month, only 9-month programs. Right. So until done. Right. Like, and as soon as we were done, that's when I really got online. And I got online because of two things. One, I really liked direct response. Like we had, the first time we ran a full page ad in the Daily News, we got 40 phone calls from it. By the time pre 9/11, we were getting like 450 to 500 calls from it, just from split testing back and forth and back and forth. So I like direct response. I like the ability to like improve and tweak. And I also loved the big pitch at that time, which was like kind of an opportunity seeking pitch, but it worked on me. The idea of having no employees, because I had just spent the last year where my whole life was just like watching my bank account get to a certain level, then go to like close to zero, then watch my bank account to a certain level and go to zero. Cause that was like every 2 weeks making payroll. So I got online because it was like direct response and no employees. This was like all I wanted. Right.
I love this. Well, so in the online journey and that whole thing, I'm excited to jump into. As the payment guy, I have to highlight what kept you in this business for a year was chargeback liability. Was that you had a future deliverable, you had a product that people had gotten part of, but had already paid for. And so in the way that chargebacks work, the way that any credit card works for a consumer is you have 6 months from the final point of delivery to dispute the charge. So if you have an annual program, after that 1 year, you still have another 6 months as the consumer to dispute the charge. And what you astutely observed, what you figured out and paid attention to was that you needed to follow through to cover your own ass. And the number of times that we see business owners not recognize that and make poor choices is astounding. But it's super important to realize that when somebody gives you money through a credit card, in many ways, it's a loan until you clear that liability.
It's an interesting way of looking. Yeah.
Well, and it is. It's an interesting way of looking at it. But as you pointed out, the first thing that would happen if you stop delivering is you have the risk of people disputing that entire annual charge, right? And so if you don't have that money fully yourself,
right,
then it's not yours yet, right? And even if you spent it, it's like a loan. Anyway, have to highlight the payment shit, obviously.
Well, and I'll say one other thing, and I don't know if this is unique to me. I would imagine it's not, but who knows? After we got it all paid off and everything, and I didn't have that liability, I could have tried to rebuild, right? But that idea was so unappealing to me to go backwards and do what I've already done. Like I had to let go of really good people. Like now I'm going to try and find really good people again for like, do you know what I mean? Like the whole idea seemed very much unappealing to me, and not because it was a horrible business or anything like that. I think and that's where I'm not sure if this would be relatable to other people, but for me, like I like doing new things and learning new things and growing, as like my way of growth is by doing that. And so the idea of now going back 3 years in time to restart rebuilding what I had already done once was like yuck in every way. Right. Like, so that's why, that was another reason why I got online, because the idea of having to find someone as good as the last clinical director, to find someone as good as the, like, et cetera, just wasn't cool for me. But what I would say is that anti-employee kind of thought process really kept me stuck online for like my first 2 years, year and a half. because I was trying to do everything on my own. And I'm not effective at a lot of things. And so I struggled quite a bit. And it wasn't until I kind of figured out that I was trying to do way too many things that were not good for my skill set and who I am and what I'm about, that things started to change for me. And how I figured it out was I was looking at all the things I was doing and how ridiculous it was, and how, like, in my previous businesses, like, in the clothing business, I didn't design the clothes, create the clothes, put them on racks, like, sell the clothes, ring up the clothes. Like, I didn't feel a need to do all those things. And same with the hypnosis business. I started out being the only hypnotist, but as soon as we had some customers, I stopped doing hypnosis and started running the business, right? So there was a lot of things I didn't do in that business either. And here I am struggling in this new business, making less than I've ever made, wondering why, and looking at how much harder I'm working than I had in these other businesses. And then realizing, well, in all those other businesses, I had a lot of other people that were handling a lot of other things for me. And here I am trying to do it all myself. And that insight or epiphany really changed my business trajectory online. And it was the basis of my very first free report that I put out, the Internet Business Manifesto, with the diagram of all the activities that I was trying to do myself but prior. And so that was really like a big shift for me. And then as soon as I kind of realized that while marketing might be different online than offline, et cetera, how you run a business is very much the same. And so that really kind of turned around my online experience. And then I'd also say, and I know I'm like fast forwarding here, but I figure we'll go back. So just kind of leaving the online trajectory, we can get back to in a second. But because of the relationship that I've had with my dad, which was never that great, right? It was great when I was a little kid looking up to him, but as soon as, like, he started screwing me over and stuff, not so great. I think there was a part of me that was always looking for other father figures to replace him, right? Like people I could go to, ask for advice, like guidance, older men that I could look up to. And it wasn't like an intentional thing, but it must have been a drive nonetheless, unconsciously, because I was very fortunate. And I ended up having two mentors who were very much different, which also was very useful and valuable. Jay Abraham and Mark Ford, or Michael Masterson of Agora, right? So two extremely successful people who kind of took me under their wing and really mentored me. And, what's interesting is that, so I'm probably more like Jay than I am like Mark, but I want to be more like Mark than Jay. Right. And so Jay, like, I had this experience consistently where, like, anytime I had a new idea, Jay was like a great guy to talk to about it, because Jay would ask me a million questions and the idea would get better just by talking to him. When I had a new idea and I brought it to Mark, a lot of times he was like, why are you doing that? Like, it works. Like, just do that. Right. And so it was very different advice I would often get from the two of them. And then one day I kind of figured it out. Like, Mark is probably one of the most interesting people you could ever meet. Like, he's written books on poetry. He's written best-selling business books. He's written books on Central American art. He's a huge Central American art collector. He has a palm tree nursery. He's a world champion in jiu-jitsu in his age group. A very wide circle of friends. He just built the biggest palm tree nursery in the world, with more palm trees from more parts of the world than any place else. He's a very interesting human being with a wide circle of friends, who is like very much a Renaissance man. And Jay is all business all the time. That's it. Right. And so it made sense that Jay would always be interested in something new because all variety in life came through variety in business because he was all business all the time. Whereas Mark always felt like business is just a vehicle to allow him to have variety in life outside of that business. Right. And so these two mentors of mine really kind of showed me, and I brought it up to both of them, like asked them like, hey, this is what I see. Would you guys agree with this? And they were both like, yeah, it's kind of, and so I've just been really fortunate to have had these two mentors like giving me different perspectives, having like this crazy upbringing as a kid who exposed me to one kind of way of looking at the world, which not necessarily the one I want. And then going the other way, like working in, a big six firm in, accounting and consulting and stuff like that. And then I had this one experience in the hypnosis business that was quite interesting, which was another reason I decided not to go back into the hypnosis business. And that is like the number one thing that we sold was weight loss. And we were very effective at it if people stuck with it, right? Most of the people who came in for weight loss were not coming in to lose like 10 pounds. They were morbidly obese, had struggled a lot, right? And had tried lots of things and not gotten success. And it occurred to me, though, based on like, let's say Consumer Reports did a study on the most effective diets back then. And, obviously we weren't even big enough to be considered, but Weight Watchers was the winner and they were 5% effective.
Yeah.
And so 5%, right? So like, let's say that we were 20% effective, 4 times better than the best, right? If you took all of our customers and to do $13.5 million in a year, you have a lot of customers. And you had them all go into a room, all the weight loss customers, had them go into a room and have them all talk to each other for an hour. And then I had to go into that room. I might be scared to go into that room, not because we did anything wrong, but like at the end of the day, more customers didn't get the outcome than did. Right.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that like, if that's the case, that's not a good thing. And I don't want to be in a business where I can't go into a room full of my customers with no fear. Like that's what I want. I want to be celebrated, not be scared. Right. And I think that has always that experience stuck with me. And it's one of the reasons that like, when I was starting business coaching online, it was really important for me to once a week have a Q&A call where any of my customers could call in and ask me a question while every other customer could call in as well and be on that line, because that was me kind of replicating that room, right? I was walking into that room on a phone as opposed to in person, but it really, it was really like, it was a learning experience for me. And I think I've learned the lesson well, and I've lived up to that, like really trying to make sure that one, that never happens to me again. And two, that I feel strongly that the overwhelming majority of people that come into contact with me or my business leave better off because of it and don't have anything bad to say about it. So,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so you hit on a bunch of stuff there. The first that sunk in was this idea of variety seeking, and not everybody values variety at the level that I think you or I do. Right? I am a variety seeker, and I do a bunch of crazy shit. Right? Like I'm looking for variety in lots of areas of my life. But I think the lesson of sort of the two mentors that you had or have is and maybe this applies to a lot of people that are trying to find variety in their own business. If you are not progressing at the rate that you think you should in business, a hypothesis could be that you are trying to do too many different things in the business instead of focus on the core boring things to make it better. And maybe a mechanism to control your own behavior there is to look for variety outside of the business and allow business to be the vehicle as opposed to this necessary catch-all to scratch all itches for yourself.
Agreed. And that the variety that I've had in business has always cost me. I've made lots of money, but I would have made more money had I not needed, wanted, pursued as much variety. Because as someone who has been out in front many times, more of the money is made behind it. Right. And, but that's just not my nature. But as I've gotten older, it's become more of my nature, because when social media first came on the scene, I had written reports about predicting it was going to be the next big thing. I was hanging out with Gary Vaynerchuk and a bunch of other people of that ilk. Right. But then as soon as I was done writing about social media being the next big thing and the next thing, I then moved on to teaching a course on theory of constraints. And then after that, I did something else. Right. I didn't stay in one area long enough to fully monetize. So, that was kind of but it is what it is. But as I've gotten older, and learning from Mark and Jay, I have recognized that one, it's better to have variety outside of business than inside of business. Two, it's important to cultivate a circle of friends outside of business, not have all your friends in business as well. And to make life outside the business as enjoyable and as and fun and variety as possible, because that then has you show up in the business differently as well. And I actually, one of the reasons I sold my business in 2017 or so, half of it to Agora. And there were a couple motivating factors for that. I bought it back in 2020, but one of the reasons that there were a bunch of reasons, but one of them was that this belief that I could continue to be the person that jumps from thing to thing to thing, but I'd have a bigger team behind me who could stay on the previous thing and fully monetize it, and fully monetize the next thing and fully monetize the next thing. Right. Because each of those things have grown to huge things, but I wasn't there to participate in a lot of that upside because I had done it and moved on. It's like an intellectual one night stand, right? I had my way with it and now I'm not interested and I'm going to move on to the next one. Conquer, conquer, conquer. Right.
Yeah. Well, perhaps that leads to your internal narrative of being a sprinter versus a marathon runner, and also leads to your narrative of wanting to build a business around your own strengths and where you are right now. Right. Mm-hmm. You are clearly a starter, right? You're a person that puts it together, builds the thing. And then once you feel like you've got the structure, you're like, yep, fuck it. Let me do something else. Let me do this again somewhere else. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. And I'll draw a parallel in a second that is going to create some conflict there. But the other thing that you mentioned before I do that, the other thing that you mentioned that I thought was really important, and it's a personal choice. But there are tons of industries where the success rate is super low. In weight loss, it's not a mystery of how to get in better shape.
Right.
Eat less, move more, or eat better food, move more. Right. That's it. It's adherence to it that is problematic.
Right. And I didn't mention this, but one of the differences is you eat a tub of ice cream at 2:00 in the morning and you're on Weight Watchers. You don't blame Weight Watchers. You blame yourself. You go to hypnosis and you spend a couple grand on a hypnosis program and you eat a tub of ice cream at 2:00 in the morning. you might not blame yourself. You might blame us. Like,
Isn't
which,
that
like, so
interesting?
that makes that walking into that room even scarier, right? Like, because it's
Yep.
not just that they didn't succeed. They didn't succeed and they blame you, which is very different than like a traditional diet.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Well, I like this topic because um, it's important to me too that I am, and it goes back to variety versus focusing on um, the boring things and the core things. I want to be in a space, but more importantly, whatever I do, I want to optimize the product itself so that the product is something that is generating results that people are happy with and like. Um, and then some of the marketing takes care of itself, right? Then you get repeat business, referral
Yeah.
business, et cetera, because the product is so good. But it makes me happier as with my value set to be
Yeah.
involved in a business that is in that space, right? Where we're creating wins for all the people involved.
I totally
Okay,
agree.
well, I know that we've got a time constraint here, so I want to just loop in the last thing because I opened the loop before, and I think it ties together. You mentioned that you were a sprinter and not a marathon runner,
Right.
yet you literally spend hours jumping rope, and
Yeah.
jumping rope is a sprint for 99.999% of the population if they
Yeah.
jump rope at all, right? But it's
Right.
it's like boxing where you think you could do it for a long time, but you get in the ring and holy shit, does 3 minutes crush you? Um,
Yeah.
Jumping rope for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes straight is wild, and I have seen that you've done it for 2 hours plus.
Yeah.
How do you? So we could talk about the whole biohacking element and like the physical element of life, and that's a big topic. But how do you see that activity versus the business stuff? Is it a departure from it? Is it an escape from it? How does that? How do those two components reconcile in your own head?
It certainly, I think it can be an escape from it, and it certainly serves as an escape sometimes, for sure. Um, it it's a good way for me to burn excess energy and to get any pent up rage or hostility that builds up. I'm a much more relaxed person after I've jumped rope than before. I also was a fat kid, and so that has always stuck with me. And when I first got online, I got really heavy again. Um, I was like 250 pounds, had a 42 or 44-inch waist. My inseam is only 30, so yeah. And so that is probably something that mentally is just always there, right? Like nowadays, I go into my closet and I can wear anything that's in my closet. Like that feels really good to me because there have been many times in my life where I could only wear maybe 10% of what was in my closet because the rest just didn't fit. And so there's this mental baggage that I carry around, right? I think that's part of it. Um, the other thing, though, is that, and this is not related exactly to the question, but it's something really interesting to me because of that history, right, of being overweight and being very unhappy about it. Um, I've always had a rule where I'm going to exercise every day. And like, I don't necessarily have to continue to exercise each day, but I have to at least start exercising each day. And then if I'm not happy doing it, I will stop. Right. So I don't have to exercise for a long period of time, but I have to, like when I used to do the elliptical before I jumped rope, I have to at least get on the elliptical and do 2 minutes or 3 minutes
Mm.
or 5 minutes. Right. And after that, if I wanted to get off, that's absolutely fine. But 99% of the time, once I'm on, I enjoy being on. Right. And I was doing an interview with someone who's very prolific at writing. And she said to me, because I was asking her how she's so prolific, and she's like, I can't really decide whether I want to be writing or not unless I am writing. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, that's interesting. I kind of use that for working out, right? I can't decide whether I want to, because the answer is always going to be no. Like, an object at rest wants to stay at rest. I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing right now. If I wanted to be working out, I'd be working out, right? Like, so the question of do I want to is kind of a bad question about anything that you want to get done, right? Like, and that never even occurred to me. It was only applied to working out. And then I was talking to this prolific writer, and she told me the same strategy for writing that I had been using to work out. Like, she must sit down and start writing before she can decide whether she wants to be writing or not. And I think that is a good, I've always had a challenge with task initiation. Like, I have ADHD, and that's like one of my big symptoms, like just getting started on the actual task. It's kind of like I'm a dog who like will walk around their mat like 20 times before they lie down, right? Like, instead of a mat, it's my desk, and I got to walk around my desk 20 times before I kind of dive in. And starting has always been, even though I'm a quick start in general, like in the specific, it's really slow. And so with jumping rope, it's I like the app that I use for it, which is kind of like, I can't believe that would be the thing, but
I love
it's
that.
called Smartrope, and it counts how many jumps you do. Any of your friends that have a jump rope, you see exactly what they did. They see exactly what you did. And then it's also tied worldwide. So you're competing with people all over the world. Right. And so that gamification really helped me in the beginning, because it just kept pushing me a little bit more. Like, I wanted to be the next person and the next person, because, I might be in 500th place. Now I'm just trying to get to 450th place or 400th place, right? Until the cardio got built up enough. And now it's a break for me. It's a reprieve, escape from business. Anytime I'm stressed, it's a something I enjoy doing. Like, I actually have fun doing it. I can't do any tricks like, like some of the cool people on TikTok or Instagram. Mine would be very boring. I'm just standing there jumping rope. But yeah, it's a mental thing. And of how far you can go with it without having to stop. And more often than not, with most people, they stop before they need to, as I used to, and recognize the desire to stop is not physical, it's actually mental. Until, like, not in the beginning for some people, obviously, if they've never done it, but so it's a great way to start my day from a standpoint of doing something challenging, because I do believe in that very, like, fully, that doing difficult things in the morning makes you more powerful during the day. So whether it's jumping rope or jumping in the cold plunge, etc., those things early in the morning, like checked off, kind of create a momentum of very few things being able to, like, kind of take you off track or stand in your way or whatever, because you've already done a few tough things that mentally were not easy to overcome in the moment.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And as somebody that's done a little bit of endurance stuff, the notion of people stopping before they need to, or well before they need to, is a lesson that gets carried across so many other areas of life. And it's a good one, I think, to stop and ponder on. Well, I have.
Yeah, I would just add to that, but I think you're right. It's a great thing to end on, that so much of business is a battle of wills. And whose will is going to win at the end of the day? Like, if you have you've told your employee to do this thing and they're not doing it, at the end of the day, it's a battle of wills. Like, either your will to have it done that way is going to win out over their will to want to do it this other way, or whatever. Right. And so, yeah, like, strengthening your own ability, your own will to do things that are tough, makes your willpower or will stronger in everything else that you're doing. And in so many things in business, like, if your will is, this is going to happen this way, it will happen that way. if your will is strong enough and stronger than anyone else's will who wants it done a different way, right? And so to your point, yeah, I think it's a good way to end, just because you can reduce so many things in business to like having a strong will and not backing down from whatever it is that you see in your vision that is not necessarily easy to make happen.
Yeah, and to finalize that parallel, it is that the strong will means that you keep going past the point where you think that you were supposed to stop. So I've got 1,000 other questions. We didn't dig into, current day work and all sorts of stuff.
I can always come back.
I love it. Yeah, we'll save it for another round here. But in the meantime, where do you want to point people? If people want to dig into Rich Schefren today, where do they go?
Well, if they're interested in marketing and that kind of stuff, the best place to go would be our main site, which is strategicprofits.com. On that site, so it's Strategic Profits. On that site, we have a product called Steal Our Winners, which are strategies and tactics that are currently crushing it that most people don't know about. And we publish 2 episodes a week. And that's really the core of my business these days. On Mondays and Fridays, I usually spend my days on Steal Our Winners. And then on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I work with my private clients. And the work that I do in Steal Our Winners makes me better for my private clients, because having everyone that's got something working sharing that with me makes it really easy for me to help my clients of what will work for them. And so I would say that our main site is probably the best place. And I think we're going to be starting to make a little bit of a push on YouTube, starting like in a month from now. I've had a YouTube account for 17 years, but I only have like 8,000 subscribers on it. So thank you to those 8,000 people. But we're going to start making more of a push on YouTube probably in the next month or 2 going onward. So that would also be a good place. And that's just under Strategic Profits. That's under my business name as well.
Perfect. Well, I will have an episode on Steal Our Winners soon. And
Yes.
I can vouch and say that there are a tremendous number of impressive characters that you have interviews with there. So I scrolled through it over the last weekend. I was looking at it, but definitely a great place to dig into business and marketing and improving yourself as an entrepreneur. Rich Schefren, I appreciate the time, man. It is great to have conversations with you. Everyone I've had has been interesting, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Thank you, man. Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million: the podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.